It was a tale of two town halls. President Donald Trump sat across from Savannah Guthrie, who did everything she could to position herself to be Joe Biden's press secretary, while sleepy Joe Biden sat across fellow Democrat crony and Clintonista George Stephanopoulos, who did everything in his power to make sure Biden never broke a sweat. It was a tale of two cities, Miami and Philadelphia, and a spectacle of two sports, hardball and softball.
Every time who I am, well, I came, I'm a man, 6 shooters in both my hands. I'm a cold-blooded brother, a real bad mother. Watch out, honey, here I am.
So on a night when there was supposed to be another debate between Joe Biden and President Donald Trump, we ended up with two separate town halls, and I only watched the Donald Trump one. I did not watch the Joe Biden one, but I have read about it, and there are some very, very stark differences. So I'm going to start out with talking about the Donald Trump one because that was the one that I actually watched. And first of all, I would just like to say that in my life, I have met and even dated my share of insufferable women. Never have I come across a woman as insufferable as Savannah Guthrie. She was awful. Donald Trump could not get out a single word without her pushing back the whole time. She was hostile. She was cantankerous. She was, I'm just going to say it. She was downright churlish. Every single time Donald Trump tried to answer a question, he would get 2 words out of his mouth, and she would jump in and try to push back against him and not let him answer. And it was funny because she brought nothing to the table that wasn't brought to the table in the first debates. It was all COVID. It was all the tax returns. It was all white supremacy. It was all the same damn things that Chris Wallace brought up in the first debate. Do these people have no new material? Do they have nothing to go after Donald Trump except for the tired and dishonest narratives that they have been pushing? So they were talking about COVID, and she kept pushing back about everything about COVID, and she was demanding an answer as to whether Donald Trump took a test the day of the first debate between him and Joe Biden. And Donald Trump said he wasn't sure. He gets tested all the time. He didn't make a mental note, whatever. She, of course, wouldn't accept that as an answer. They were talking about the event with Amy Coney Barrett, and she showed pictures of how nobody was wearing masks, and they were talking and all that kind of stuff. And Donald Trump also mentioned that he had meetings with Gold Star families the day after, so he wasn't sure where he contracted the disease. And she actually had the gall to respond. So since you brought it up, are you suggesting a grieving military family gave you COVID? It was one of the most unfair phrasings you could possibly give, because if he was going to say it was possible, he's all of a sudden now blaming grieving military families. Now, don't get me wrong. We all feel for and respect grieving military families, but it's not as if them being a grieving military family makes it worse that if he happened to get COVID from one of them. Like, maybe he did. But the way that she had to phrase it, are you suggesting that a grieving military family gave you COVID? As if Donald Trump was trying to accuse them of some devious plot from these poor grieving military families. It was so disgusting. And then they were also talking about herd immunity. And she was describing what herd immunity was. She said something along the lines of let the young people get sick and protect the old. But let's just be clear, it also means more deaths. Do you support the herd immunity strategy? Essentially boxing him in, where if he said that herd immunity has some sort of merits in terms of getting past it, then he was also supporting more deaths. So the framing was just extremely disgusting. And, Trump probably could have done a better job of pushing back and saying, well, it doesn't necessarily mean more deaths. I think you're making that up. We've seen places like Sweden that actually did the herd immunity route, and they seem to be fine. It might mean that maybe you have a few more deaths right off the bat, but then in the long run, you end up saving a number of lives. So he kind of surrendered she stole the premise there. And he didn't push back on that. And that's one thing that I think Donald Trump doesn't necessarily do well enough is outright reject the premises. I feel like he used to do that better than he does now. I feel like Donald Trump used to do a better job of just saying downright, I reject your premise. No, here's what I have to say. And of course she had to bring up white supremacy, because of course she had to bring up white supremacy. And she gave the tired line that he didn't denounce it at the first debate, when of course he did right away. Chris Wallace asked, do you denounce white supremacy? He goes, sure. That's agreeing. Sure, I denounce white supremacy. But because he didn't say, yes, I, Donald Trump, hereby at this moment at your debate denounce white supremacy, because he didn't say it like that, they had to say it wasn't satisfactory, that he didn't actually do it. But of course he did. And again, I wish Donald Trump would just say, there are compilations of me that you can look up on YouTube if you did your job and did any research, where you could see me denouncing white supremacy countless times over the years, even before I ever ran for office. I've denounced it time and time again, and the fact that you guys keep having me denounce it means that you are lying to the American public and telling them that you think I'm a white supremacist, and that you're not letting me have my own voice in this, because I've done it time and time again. I feel like the whole idea, Donald Trump started the idea of fake news and pushed back against the fake news narrative, but he seems to have lost his vigor on that a little bit. And I think that's a mistake, because I think one of the big things that drives Donald Trump is the American people's distrust in the media. And so when he doesn't just outright smack down their premises with full force like he used to, then he's kind of giving them that edge. When they're able to assume the premise, when they're able to steal the premise, now all of a sudden he's on the defensive. Donald Trump is at his best when he is on the offensive. And I feel like too often he is not on the offensive anymore. Now, that's not to say entirely that he doesn't go on the offensive, because he definitely did. She brought up QAnon as well, and she was trying to get him to denounce QAnon, and I thought it was funny, because he actually wouldn't do it, and I think that's actually smart of him not to do it. For one, because you have these people in the media try to talk about QAnon as if it's some dangerous terrorist network or something like that, when really it's just a bunch of people who distrust the media, hate the establishment. It's people that know they've been lied to and are trying to go to alternative places for information. And, Trump said that, I don't know anything about that. I don't know anything about QAnon. And she straight up called him a liar right there and said, no, yes, you do. Yes, you do. And she said, they say that there's a bunch of satanic pedophiles in the deep state. And Trump's like, well, I know they don't like pedophiles. And, pedophiles are a really bad thing. And so he did kind of catch her off guard there a little bit, where, what are you going to do? You're going to back up pedophiles? But she tried to push that and say, well, do you believe that the deep state is run by pedophiles, or something along that line? And he said, I don't know. He didn't shut it down. And, it's smart of Trump to not take the bait on these QAnon questions, because we all know what they're actually trying to do. It's not that they're really all that worried about QAnon. What they want Trump to do is disenfranchise a large group of people who are his supporters. That's what they're looking for him to do. So he wants them, they want anybody who follows QAnon to lose faith in Trump by him denouncing them. And so he's smart not to do it. And I'm not going to get into what I think about QAnon. That's irrelevant. This is about the strategy of them going after QAnon for it and how Trump responds to it. They also asked him about retweeting elements of that story, the Nick No, Anna Kate thing that I reported on a couple days ago, which if you haven't watched that video, you really should. And she tried to accuse him of spreading a conspiracy theory, this or that, and Trump says, it was a retweet. It was a retweet. I saw it, and I thought people should see the information. And Trump's whole idea, which he could have pushed out more forcefully, was that people need to see information and decide for themselves what they think. And Savannah Guthrie just immediately shot back, but it isn't true. And that is where I really wish Trump had fired back and said, who the hell are you to decide what is and isn't true? If there is information out there, people need to be able to assess it instead of just being told by the likes of you, told by the media, told by big tech, told by the establishment what is and isn't true, and then they just take your word for it. because nobody trusts you, because there have been so many things that the media has told us is true that aren't, and so many things so many things that they have told us that aren't true that are true. And so I think he could have done a better job, again, of calling out the media, smacking them down on that. Trump was on the defensive too much on this. He wasn't on the offensive. He did make his points, but again, you know, I think at this point they've really beat him down quite a bit by just berating him nonstop. And this Savannah Guthrie was one of the worst I've ever seen. By the time he got 3 words out of his mouth, she was already telling him he was wrong, pushing back on it, just calling him a liar at times, just outright. And of course, she had to bring up the whole taxes thing, too. Nobody cares about Donald Trump's taxes. At least nobody who's going to vote for Donald Trump cares about Donald Trump's taxes. So, again, she said that he only paid $750. Not true. He paid a lot more. That was his liability. Trump also pointed out that if they have that information, they're in violation of the law. They broke the law in order to get that, and he said the numbers were all wrong. And also, if you talk about that New York Times story, they backed it up with nothing. They didn't back it up with anything. They just printed the words, and here you go. Take our word for it. But did we get any sort of social media pushback, blocking the fact-checking information that we got on the whole New York Post story? No, we didn't. And speaking of that, let's go ahead and get to the Biden debate. Again, I did not watch, not debate, but Biden town hall. I did not watch it, but I do know that he was not asked a single question about this bombshell story, and actually it's stories now from the New York Post. The first one talking about how his son, there were emails thanking Hunter, or emails from Burisma, the CEO or whatever it is, the head of Burisma, thanking Hunter Biden for the chance to meet Joe Biden, for bringing him to D.C. and letting him meet Joe Biden. And Biden has said outright that he didn't know what Hunter Biden was doing and he never met any of Hunter Biden's business partners. Outright lie. Outright lie. And he wasn't asked about any of the new information that's come out about Hunter Biden's dealings in China. Joe Biden was not asked any hardball questions about what seems to be a crime family that the Bidens are running. And not only was he not asked any questions about it, of course, we've already, everybody's talked ad nauseum at this point about how when the stories came out from the New York Post, that Twitter, Facebook, they were banning, and I think even YouTube was banning a ton of people talking about it. A bunch of channels that I'm familiar with no longer exist today. And it's because they've been talking about Hunter Biden. This is election interference. This is downright Soviet-style, Chinese Communist Party style censorship and propaganda, not allowing any dissenting information that goes against the establishment narrative. And there's other information coming out now that I think, I'm going to cover this stuff in another video, so I don't want to talk about what's being done with social media, but something's got to give. Something's got to give, and it's got to happen fast. In fact, it should have happened a long damn time ago. Again, I'm going to move on because that's going to be for another video. But Joe Biden still would not answer the court packing question. In fact, he said that, when asked about the court packing question, he said that it would depend on how the whole Amy Coney Barrett confirmation went. Which is kind of just, I'm going to kick this can down the road. And of course, this is like a week after when he was asked, don't the American people deserve to know whether you're going to pack the court? And he says, no, they don't deserve to know. That's your candidate, Joe Biden. You, the American people, do not deserve to know what he intends to do if you elect him. And that attitude is permeating the entire Joe Biden campaign because we have not gotten, I can't think of a single specific policy proposal that he has put forth. He was asked how he would handle coronavirus, and he said, we would do it rationally. What the hell does that mean? At the debates, he was never pushed on anything about what he is directly going to do. And in fact, it was hilarious in the vice presidential debates. Mike Pence flat out called them out for plagiarizing the Trump plan for it. And then joking about how Biden knows something about plagiarism, which was a good line on Mike Pence's part. There was another very interesting thing that came up, though, with Joe Biden. Some woman talked about how she has 2 kids, 8 years old and 10 years old, and how the 8-year-old is transgender, and asking him about, what is his take on discrimination against transgenders and that kind of thing. And Joe Biden said the idea that an 8-year-old child, a 10-year-old child, decides, I want to be transgender, that's what I think I'd like to be. It'd make my life a lot easier. There should be zero discrimination. He is the idea is not actually about discrimination. The idea is not about discrimination. It is about an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old not having the developed mental faculties to make that call that will affect them for the rest of their lives. So he completely missed what the real issue is. When you're talking about adults, okay, that's one thing with discrimination. When you're talking about 8 and 10-year-old children, that's a very different thing. They're not at the age of consent. They can't consent to anything. They shouldn't be figuring out their sexuality and their orientation or their gender status when they're prepubescent. That's kind of gross and it's kind of creepy. And it also left a lot of questions open about whether Joe Biden actually would support puberty blockers for children. Because when you start getting into that territory, you start getting into stuff that is way, way off base for what most normal American citizens would agree with. But, of course, he didn't answer anything like that, and he just... He took an issue that is about the safety of children and made it an issue about discrimination. Which, of course, you can expect a Democrat to do because everything that they talk about has to do with intersectionality, discrimination, social justice, and all of this absolute nonsense. So, and of course, it has to be stated that while Trump had to sit across from Savannah Guthrie, who, like I said, was absolutely obnoxious in her handling of the situation, completely unprofessional. It felt like she was just out there trying to score brownie points for all of her media cohorts. Joe Biden lands George Stephanopoulos, who worked for the Clintons, is deeply entrenched in this Democrat establishment as anybody. He basically got to draw an ally. So if Joe Biden gets to draw a town hall debate moderated by, or the town hall event moderated by George Stephanopoulos, why does Donald Trump not to get one moderated by, say, Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity or Greg Gutfeld? Why doesn't he get somebody like that? The entire deck is stacked against Donald Trump in this election. And the establishment media, big tech, they're doing everything they can to throw the election. And at this point, they are not even hiding it. We need serious reforms with the media, with social media, with how our national discussions are handled. Because right now, it is nothing but a sea of leftists beating down and censoring any opposition. And we cannot have an America where only one side gets a say. That is how we will devolve into a despotic, totalitarian system, and that's how you're going to get civil war. That is how you're going to get the right arming up and saying, you know what, you're not going to give us a place in this country, we're taking it the fuck back. And that will happen. That will happen. And it's not going to be pretty. So, anyways, guys, that's the video. If you haven't already, hit that like button, turn that thumbs up blue, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell. You'll never know when I set a video out because we all know it's voices like mine that are first to be taken out back in Old Yeller by the folks at Big Tech. And if you're on all those Big Tech platforms, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Ram Thorburn. Also on some of the alt tech sites like Parler, Minds, and Pill.net, also at Ram Thorburn. And if you're interested in contributing to the channel, there are links to my Subscribestar, Patreon, and PayPal down in the description below. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.